I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are life physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write our story.
Hello, everyone. Happy day, Ohio. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, because you know what? We have a very special guest today with me here on the Words from the Wise podcast. Per usual, I'm Gary Wise. I'm the host of this podcast. And today, I've got a really exciting guest. I've got a veteran of the Australian Armed Forces. He spent some time working with their special force teams. He's a mixed martial artist in a piece of his life. He has spent his career post-military working in high-pressure environments and helping people figure out how they can best recover, recuperate, and find calm, right? Especially if they're living in the chaos. He goes by the name of Tim Thomas. And Tim, I want to introduce you to the show. Tim, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, big good day from down under.
Man, thank you for that. And hey, Tim Thomas, and just so I understand this, you're a mixed martial artist. Did you start doing MMA when you were in the military or after you got out of the military?
Yeah, so this was in the 90s when it was just starting. So in Australia, it wasn't quite legal. So when we fought, it was in these kind of underground, seedy biker bars, and it was classed as no rules fighting.
Right.
And you could smoke in bars back then. So you're walking in the ring, coughing up half a lung from secondhand smoke. And I was more of a wrestler. I was the first people in Australia to get into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And so, but everyone in the bar, all these sort of tough biker looking dudes wanted to see a big knockout. So whenever I took it to the ground, they'd boo and, throw stuff. But that was the pioneering days of mixed martial arts, which then became mixed martial arts.
Okay. I remember those days. I was a teenager during that time, and I remember watching like the first UFC fight match, right? When these guys were just there wasn't real weight classes, right? It was just anybody against everybody.
So much blood on the floor.
And it was just getting started out. So I'm sure that was an interesting time. How old were you when you were doing that level of fighting? Were you in your early 20s?
No, 25. I had a bit
25.
of a mid-20s kind of breakthrough. And I, without going too far into it, I basically projected forward because I thought, well, I'm 25. I know what 25 years feels like. Right. And it didn't feel like it went that long. I felt like I clicked my fingers, and if I click my fingers again, I'm going to be 50. So I had a conversation with my 50-year-old self, and it said, Tim, you can live with a lot of things without a lot of money, people thinking poorly of you, but you can't live with regret. What would the 50-year-old version of you regret not doing now? And for whatever reason, it was really commit to martial arts. So that's what that's what I did. And that was when all these other opportunities started happening in the early days of mixed martial arts.
Do you think it was, and I'm going to just dive down that hole real quick, right? Do you think it was just because you applied the discipline required to become a mixed martial artist, the other opportunities started to manifest out of that?
I'll tell you what it gave me access to was understanding that our bodies contain mass. Like in Australia, we weigh things in kilos. So I'm about 87 kilos. Okay. That's a measurement of mass. That's probably 180 pounds in your measurement. Right. Okay. And I know this sounds weird, right? But because we contain mass, our bodies do, we're stuck in this moment. So my body was training in martial arts, but my mind doesn't contain any mass. So I wasn't particularly in the moment, right? So I was training for years and I wasn't making great gains. So what I did was, instead of just training, I sat on the sidelines and I stared where I was going to train, and I focused, and I had all these images on how I would train, and if the coach said something, I'd do it 100%. And so once my mind and my body started connecting, that discipline, it's like a gravity happens. Because I put it to everyone listening, when your mind and body are 100% in that moment, there's not a thing you can't handle. Everything in my life started coming to me that I wanted. the coaches that I wanted, the friends that I wanted, the life partner that I wanted, all because when I noticed that I needed to be in a fight for me to be 100% connected. Otherwise, my mind would be somewhere else. And that mind-body connection happens on the back of the disciplines needed to get you into that zone. And then when you're in that zone, it's like everything changes. So that was my experience. And I needed that kind of idea that I'm about to go into a fight. And if I can't change the fact if my opponent's more skilled than me, but I can be in charge of the fact that I'm going to train harder than him. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. And what I also like about that is the alignment of recognizing my mind needs to be in this moment with my body in this exact moment, because we just tend to always be thinking about a million things and not focused on the actual thing. I don't know how many times my wife has told me, I wish you would be in the present, right? Right. I mean, it's just, and it's because not only did I always naturally have so many different, like, I would say maybe not even ideas, but I just keep getting pulled into a lot of different thinking spaces, and they're all inspiring, right? Or the ones that are unhealthy are the complication, right? That's another challenge. You get pulled into these toxic holes as well that can distract you. And I was talking to a young lady today that was one of my students, and she joined the Marine Corps. She's now a Marine, and she told me that she just got to her new command and that there's like a reputation there that no one's happy. And I told her, I said, one thing I learned in my years in the military is that people were very rarely happy where they're at. They're almost always talking about where they used to be or where they're going to go to next. And I said, I learned how to be very successful where I'm currently at right now, because that's where I needed to be the most, I would say, productive, right? If you're not productive in the present, that future is not going to be what you hope it's going to be, because you didn't put the work in to get it to where it's got to go. And oh, by the way, you'll never go back and live the past again. It's just a memory, and we always remember it better than it really was, but then I can apply that same logic to damn near almost anything. And so that really resonates with me. But then I also like where you said my body is a certain amount of weight and it's stuck in the present, but my mind doesn't have any weight and it's free to roam. It's free to go. And I will tell you that that's a very, I think, colorful thought for me, because it's liberating to think about that places your mind is free to go, even if your body's limited to certain things. Right. And to have a strong mind is probably one of the most important things to have in this world. Right.
Yeah. And when you were speaking then, Gary, I want to offer you something, because we just accept the fact that our mind has trouble staying in this body, right? If I could offer you, like us humans, and I can see you especially, we're high stimuli. Your mind wants stimuli. And if it's not getting from this present moment, from this bag of meat that's holding up our eyeballs, then it'll go, look, nothing holding me to this moment. I'm going to go through space and time and find stimuli. And have you ever wondered why you can have 100 good things happen and one bad thing, and you always remember the bad thing? Because the bad thing usually is the highest stimuli. And if we're not giving our mind the stimuli it needs from our body, it'll go, guess what? Nothing holding me here. I'm going to go through space and time. So that's why I like to start my day with the disciplines that give my mind the stimuli it needs, so I can actually be in the moment and actually be with people. Because I can feel, my ex-wife, I call my then wife, used to say that to me all the time. You're not here, right? And if I noticed that if I gave my mind, my high stimuli mind, the stimuli it needed from my body, then I'm in the moment with people. And I noticed if I didn't give my mind the stimuli I needed from within my body, I looked outside of my body. I ate more. I thought outside of the moment more. And people can kind of tell when you're checked out. And they won't say anything.
Right.
They'll just, won't speak to that guy again. But when you're actually with somebody, there's a certain vitality and energy, and it almost doesn't matter what you say. If you can be fully present with that person, it's something happens that could never otherwise happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a skill, right? It's a skill. You have to train yourself to be a good listener. You have to train yourself to find interest in what the communication is going to be about, and to hopefully get to know the other human being, because at the end of this whole experience, this is one of my favorite things about doing the podcast, right? Is I get to have a conversation with you this afternoon, this evening, right? Yeah, you're in the land down under, you're down there in Brisbane, Australia. I'm here in the great state of Florida in the southeastern United States of America, but we get to sit here and talk about things that we're both into, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm a high school teacher now. I retired from the military. I did 25 years with the United States Navy, and now I teach high school kids in an ROTC classroom, which is like a military, paramilitary class, right? And it's leadership development, it's citizenship development, and it's giving them options to prepare for life after high school, which is like, 15 through 18 years old is like the age bracket, right? And they watch these videos, they listen to some of these videos, and they get the chance to hear some of this commentary. And it's some of the same things we talk about in the classroom, right? Because I want them to understand that they're on the beginning of what could be an amazing life, right? If it's not where you want it to be yet, and you're 16 years old, well, congratulations, you got a whole lot of living to do, man. You can listen from people like you and myself, take some words of wisdom, and then go to work and making the life to the best of your ability that you hope that you're looking for. And I hope you like what you find, because sometimes you reap what you sow, and not always do you really want the consequences of the decisions you make, but it seems good at the time, right?
Yeah.
My guy. So, brother, so you're doing mixed martial arts in the 90s. When do you decide to go ahead and enter into the service, into the armed forces of Australia? When does that happen?
I tried to get in when I was 19, Gary, but the recruitment process was so disorganized and they lost my paperwork and this. And then I'm like, if this is what it's like trying to get in, what's it going to be like on the inside? So I forgot about it for many years. But then in 2004, two interesting things happened. One, first time in Australia's military history, they started at what's called a DRSF scheme, direct recruiting into special forces from the civilian population. Never done it before, right? Essentially, we figured it out. The government knew war was coming, and the most economical way to fight that was with special forces. So they had a budget, but they didn't have bums on seats, because up until that point in Australia's military history, you'd have to spend 2 years in a regular battalion, which is no small thing, before you could even apply for special forces. So, and I was on the very first scheme, and they absolutely hated us. Resistance at every turn. And we've got so our School of Infantry is at Singleton in Australia, right? And we've got a statistic there that still stands to this day, 300% more injuries than any other platoon that went through there, because they deliberately tried to stop the scheme. And the other thing that happened to make me want to get in the military was I wanted to start a family. And my skill set, I could punch and kick and wrestle. That didn't make any money. That wasn't paying the bills. That couldn't sort of give my family the kind of financial life that I wanted to give them. But the military, this particular scheme, had a set of qualifications that I had, and the other thing that prompted me to do it was the cutoff age was 30, and I was 29 3/4. And I thought, well, if I don't do this, I might regret it. And so I joined at almost 30, and everyone's saying, you're too old to get in the special forces. And being dyslexic, I see things differently. And when I point them out, it'll be obvious. But when everyone was saying, you're too old. And I thought, well, this is the first time I've ever actually aged. This is the first time I've been almost 30, right? So shouldn't it be me deciding what I can and can't do at this age, not anyone else? And I, went for it. And there was guys sort of younger, fitter, faster, stronger, probably smarter than me on the course, but they didn't make it because of a number of reasons. But I think growing up in the 70s and just getting beaten up every day at school, and it was just a thing. It wasn't, you didn't even tell your parents. It was just a thing, right? That certain tactile toughness that you had, from that sort of old school growing up sort of served me well in those places. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you had, of course, your generational difference, right? You had probably maturity on your side. You'd done probably a little bit more living than some of them guys, especially as a martial artist. There's a lot of mental tenacity that comes into all of that. I think it's interesting hearing about the resistance to change from the traditional special force guys that were probably like, hey, why don't they got to do it the way that we did it, right? There's always
Yeah.
going to be that in life. People are always resistant to change because we as humans, it makes us uncomfortable. But I think for those of us that learn to recognize positive change, that's a game that's a very, very, very good thing. Now change just for the sake of change, not always, but like you said, there was a reason they were doing this. They needed more bums on the seat, right? To get more people in those positions that could pass the test. So I think a few of those, and then probably just you were going to be damned if you quit, probably, right? They're going to have to break you, and that never happened because whether you knew it or not, you were probably aligning your mind and your body to do the thing, right? So that's an amazing feat, though. I will tell you, to come to this to come to the military service at almost 30 years old and survive through that is that had to make you feel good when you got through and you graduated that course of training.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because you remember how I should have asked what the rating on this language rating. We're keeping this PG today, or are we?
It's up to you, brother. I'm not worried about it.
All right. Look, there's no other way to say this. They fucking hated us. All right. So our beret ceremony was okay. Those of you who've passed selection, and you had to get an insertion course before you could get beret qualified. They said, okay, chuck your lids on. Now go scrub out the shitters. And we cleaned these toilets that hadn't been cleaned since Vietnam with our berets on. It wasn't until Afghanistan kicked off that they were like, oh, these guys can do everything we can do. Oh, this is a really good thing. So we sort of trampled down the thorns as the first guys across the line. And then once, we proved our worth, then it was like, oh, this is a really, really good scheme. Yeah. So that's what made our sort of time unique. And you know what it's like in the military. It's not just the job. That's the thing. It's organizing everything else in your life, because you don't have a normal life like other people have. You are immersed in this thing. And so, fun but true story. In the first week of my basic training in Australia, I got a letter back when they were writing letters and saying pregnant, and I did the math, and it worked out that my then wife was giving birth on selection, and that was hanging over my head the whole time. And you work incredibly hard to do this. Like, I know the SEALs have like a hell week, right? Well, we got a hell month. 28 days is our selection course, and that's a hell of a time for an ass kicking. Quantity has a certain quality to it, if you know what I mean. And
right.
They said to me, look, this is Special Forces selection, Tim. You can see your son being born, or you can do selection. You can't do both. And that was bloody hard, because I had to go, well, what does that kid need? I had to see it from his perspective. Does he need me there at his birth, or does he need a dad with a job? And so I got my then wife, all the support she needed, flew in family, all that sort of stuff. And I did selection, and they let me have a phone on selection just so I could keep track of things. Right. And I mean, every day is hard, but this one particular day was very hard. So, fire and movement, where you're crawling, you're shooting, you're crawling, you're shooting. And we were crawling through these paddocks with these cactuses that had barbs like an inch long, and they would go through your boot. And at the end of every fire and movement, we'd get our bayonets out, which is I'm sure you know what that is, and we'd have to pull out these cactuses, right? And you got to be careful, because if you flicked it too hard, it could often flick off and hit your mate. And it was just like the rough day. And I get this message from my then wife saying, it's all happening, water's broken, the baby's coming. And I just looked up at this green tree, and I'm like, I'm going to regret this day the rest of my life. And, later that day, we're in the night harbor, and I've just laid out a claymore, and I'm walking backwards, flaying out the line. And then out of nowhere, this officer turns up and goes, "Oh, hey, Tim. Hey, no worries. How's your wife going?" And she, "Oh, it's all good. The water's broken. It's all happening." And then he says, "Oh, do you want to go see her?" And in that moment, my left foot goes forward. My right hand is in a fist behind my back, and I'm lining up this guy's chin. Yeah. Because this is what they do in selection. They say, "Okay, you want a drink of water?" And they'll tip water out in front of you. Just bring all these heavy logs to the truck, and you go all the way to the truck, and then the truck drives off, and they just keep doing that. Right. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to jail. I'm knocking an officer out today, right now. And so I go quiet and serious, and this officer kind of senses this, and he goes, no, Tim, I'm being serious. Do you want to go see her? And I kind of tilted my head a little bit. Yeah. And the good thing about the Army is when an officer gets on the phone and starts swearing, things start happening really quickly. So, a truck came and grabbed all my, bombs and bullets. Another truck came and grabbed me and started racing. It was about a 45-minute drive to the hospital. And I am running down the aisle. I'm still in stinking, cams, been out in the bush for so long, still got cam grease all over my face. I'm running down the hospital, and I make it to the room. I see my son being born, and then straight back out into the field.
That's very cool. Like, that's number one, that you're within reach of getting home. That'd be even harder, being 45 minutes away from the hospital and training. I mean, it's one thing where you're deployed, 3, 4, 5 hours away, or over a hop across some water or whatever it is, but to only be an hour or less away, you would have thought, like, I'm glad that guy finally put it together and took care of you, but you would have thought somebody would have figured that out ahead of time and given you a peace of mind, right? Like, hey, Tim, we could make this happen for 3, 4 hours, bud. Like, you're kicking ass, taking names. I'm glad that guy did it for you, but I'm sorry they were playing games with you the rest of the time, brother. That's crazy. And I'm glad you made it. What a story. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Now, how long? Go ahead.
Well, no, the funny thing was, like, I see my child being born, and I didn't know if it was going to be a girl or a boy. It's a boy. I was really happy. And look, there was a few complications at the birth, and, probably 6 hours later, I finally find out that everything's okay with, my partner at the time. And about 5 a.m., I go straight back out into the field, and that's when they start demarcation, which is 3 days, 3 nights, no sleep, no food, but they let you drink water. And as much as that was hard, I had this boost having gone through that arduous experience. And I was later to find out that a lot of the other guys had gotten so much from me just going through that. They were saying, well, I might be hurting, but look what Tom I went through, just to be here. So I was later to find out that had a deep impact on other people, doing the selection.
Well, and I'm sure they cared about you, which is a big piece of it, right? That's one of my favorite parts about being in the service is you really build some strong connections with people that you'll have for the rest of your life. And uh, that camaraderie is one of the best things that we have that the whole organization really brings to the conversation is you really get to build some strong relationships. And I'm sure that they were happy for you because that suck was so bad, right? You guys were going through such horrible conditions that something that significant was probably a boost for a lot of them. uh, After you graduated the school, how long did you end up spending in the armed forces with Australia? How long were you actually active duty?
Yeah, so I was in the Commandos for 6 years full time, 2004 to 2010.
So 2004, 2010, Special Forces in Australia. And I heard you say earlier you went to Afghanistan. How much do you, looking back on that 6 years, uh, how was that operational tempo, that op tempo? Were you pretty busy? Were you guys deploying a lot, or
Well,
how was that looking back on that 6 years?
yeah. So when Afghanistan first kicked off, that was Australia's first, operational deployment since Vietnam. And people were jumping over their mothers' graves to get on that deployment, right? Because, when they come, they come. When they go, you never see them again. But a few years in, like there's rotation after rotation after rotation, people just, it became such a Afghanistan, oh, okay, whatever. Guys would rock into the mess and say, does anyone here want to go on the next rotation to Afghanistan? And guys would look at each other. Do you want to go? Do you want to go? All right. If you go, I'll go. All right. And then, yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll go on this one. So it became a very common thing. It went from like this scarce thing to like happening all the time. And now I was almost shocked that in the unit currently, there are a few Afghan vets still in there, but they're sort of referred to like the Vietnam vets, which shocked me, because the new crews come in and it's been, 10 plus years since any kind of, since any Afghan trips,
I do know we have a similar thing in America, and I would think I was kind of curious about that. And so for us, similar, uh, there was a lot of deployments from 2001 until about 2000 and I would say 13, 12, right?
Yep.
And then the trying to come out of that operational tempo was hard for a lot of us because we had really gotten used to being forward and being aggressive, right? And like being I would say kinetic, right? Doing the things that we did, whether it didn't matter if you were Navy, Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, Special Forces, everybody was busy doing something. Plus, technology had been ramping up. So we were all just, the busy cycle of life was just multiplied by a factor of like 100 with technology on top of all of the operations that were getting thrown out toward everybody. And that, at least for us, when we started to draw that back down, it was really hard. It was really hard to unwind all of that I would say anxiety that came with all of the things that was happening because you never got off that treadmill of life, right? And eventually it got to the point where the new generation was coming in and basically telling us that, they were ready for us to get out of the way because we were always so, I would say, I don't want to say aggressive, but I would say assertive. I would say we were built for leaning into things, vice allowing them to play out a little bit. And there was a similarity, at least in my opinion, with the Vietnam vets and the generation that came after them. We call them here in America, we call them the Global War on Terror vets, right? The veterans that have that Global War on Terror stink on them, right? They just kind of have that edge. And of course, when we were watching the news and we see what's happening in the world, a lot of us are like, you're going to want to reactivate a bunch of us because we're the ones that was out there doing the thing. But of course, fighting is actually different right now because technology has changed a lot of the game and strategies are different, right? Which is a good thing. I was showing my students in the 90s, we did a thing in Iraq called Desert Storm and Desert Shield. and I was showing my students how they were offloading all those trucks or whatnot. And I said, now look at what's different about the Persian Gulf now. Now we're just bombing the hell out of them from the seas. We're not putting nobody over there on the ground. And that's great. That's amazing, because it gets real bad. It gets real shitty real quick when people can't just get back on the boat and leave, right? So, but we can definitely relate. We can definitely relate. Now, when you got out of the service, when you stepped away from the commandos, why did you do that? Because you had chose to do that because of the job, right? Like you said you wanted to do it because it was a good job for your family. But in Australia, is it not just a career, or did you decide to not make it a career, or what happened there?
Okay, so after my trip to Afghanistan in 2009, I'm like, this is a job for life. I've got my brothers around me. They know me. I know them. And I was a private, and I was working my way up through. I was in a company of commandos, right? And I'm not a regimented soldier. Like on base, I'm not the guy that looks the regimented, and I ask too many questions. There's a few things about military culture that took me a while to figure out. And so that made me kind of the odd guy out. And I wasn't a drinker. I was a family guy. But after 2009, we had a hell of a trip. And then something happened which changed everything. And it was, strangely enough, around a end of deployment party. So it'd been a big deployment. We were successful. We'd lost guys, and we're going to have all get on a boat in Sydney Harbour and have a few beers. And, it was like $100 US. I paid my money, and I didn't organize it, but someone had organized strippers, right? Now, my promise to my then wife is I'll never do anything away from you that I wouldn't do right next to you. And she knew this, and she could trust me. And I'm not a fan of strippers, but, if the boys want them, whatever. If they're at one end of the boat, I'll be at the other end of the boat. But then word gets out amongst the wives that they're going to have strippers at this party. And it gets to the head of the whole commandos, the CO, commanding officer. Shit rolls downhill. And then our major at the time was super pissed that someone had interfered with his plans. And he brought out the whole company. And the thing about special forces guys, you don't actually have to give them orders. The commander shows his intent. Here's my intention. I trust you to do it. And it was very clear that this guy's intent, he was super pissed that someone had messed with his plans. And then after he'd sort of torn strips off everybody, he yells at everyone, right, raise your hand now if you've got a problem with strippers. Right? And I literally had an existential sort of moment. This kind of almost like like a jester, like that mate that always prods you at the wrong time. I literally had a version of me tap me on the shoulder, say, hey, Tim, there's never a convenient time to be yourself. Right? And you got like 3 seconds to act on this. And I'm like, shit. And I stuck my hand up. And no crap. It was like Moses going through the Red Sea. Every head turned. And this major kind of took a step back. What you do? And I'm just there with my hand up, right?
Right.
And within a few short weeks, my ass gets transferred to another company. And when I get to that new company, because the new company was about to deploy, I'm like, oh, great. I proved myself on deployment, right? But when I get there, the officer comes up and says, we've fucking heard about you. And I had all the corporals and sergeants standing around me, kind of chest poking me. And I'm like, shit. Look, I ain't scared to die, but I know what's going to happen on this deployment. They'll send all the guys that aren't in the inner circle through the door first. Okay, so a big job of the commandos is going through doors and securing areas. So they're going to make me the number one bullet catcher. And if I get shot up, yeah, they'll write me a really great, lovely letter. He's the greatest soldier ever. But I'm like, fuck dying for these cunts. You know, if I stay here, that means I agree with their sense of my worth.
Right.
So I went from career for life, job for life, I'm in here, to if I stay here, that's me agreeing with their sense of my self-worth. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what I was going to do. But within 24 hours of that conversation, I handed in my notice and kind of left without any sort of clear plan. You know, my wife at the time was very supportive. She could see what was going on. But yeah, I think it was my reactive state. There would have been an amount of undiagnosed PTSD in that. And what nobody tells you, you know, oh, be yourself, right? Speak your truth. No one tells you about the freaking massive cost of that. The reason why a lot of people aren't truthful, the reason why a lot of people aren't authentic is when they have been, it seems like you get punished. Okay, there's a whole loss of a whole lot of things that you're familiar with. And me simply speaking that truth in that moment set me on a path that probably 4 years later, and this is 4 years after I got out, was pretty crappy times, lots of alcohol, lots of pills. But when I started coming out of it, I realized there's a lot of other veterans in the same space, stuck in the same thing. So I started creating these programs with no training, only lived experience. And the goal here was to save lives from suicide. Mm-hmm. And I thought my lifetime goal was to save 40 veteran lives from suicide. I chose that number because that's how many the Australian forces have lost in Afghanistan. I would have died happy if I achieved that, but that was achieved within 12 months. 1 or 2 guys a week would come up to me and say, do you remember that conversation? Do you remember that program? Well, I had everything ready in the car to kill myself. And that one thing stopped it. And I never would have been in that situation if I hadn't, 4 or 5 years earlier, actually spoken my truth, lost everything that was important to me, and then been put in a position where I could actually, save more lives than I ever could have in the battle space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like, any commander, my job in the Navy towards the end of my career, my last 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years, I was the senior enlisted advisor to the commander, right? That's what I did. I was a firefighter for the first 16 years, and then I converted over to being like the senior enlisted, like the sergeant major to the CO. And I would have cautioned the CO from making a statement like that to a large group of people, because I would have said, and what are you going to do, sir, if somebody says yes, right? If you go out there and you ask this flippant, because it was a rhetorical question, right? He didn't think anyone was going to have the courage to say something. And so I think that not only is it super courageous, but it's just like you said earlier, undiagnosed PTSD. Like you just have this defiance, and you're like, you were probably already upset that you felt like you were compromising this deal you had made with your then partner, right? And you were already felt some type of way about that. And then here is this guy who is a brother of yours. You don't care about the rank. You guys are all commandos in this organization. And he's asking you what you believe to be an authentic question. And I'm going to answer authentically. And then when you look around the room and you realize, well, it's not authentic and nobody else is being authentic. And now you're unique. And then, of course, it becomes like zombie land and they all want to start eating you because you're not a zombie. Right. But I think that in those moments where your intuition and your instinct is giving you that prompt, you got to jump, right? You got to jump on those moments. And when you don't, you're going to struggle with that in the future because you're going to be like, man, why did I not, was I lacking courage? Was I lacking whatever it was? But then of course, all those consequences that came after that, which I think you're spot on, right? Unfortunately, is if they didn't feel like they could trust you, or if they didn't feel like just whatever unfortunately their biases was going to be in that space, it was probably the best thing for you to do to just call it and leave. And I will tell you, in my own personal career, one of the things everyone knew about me was that I was going to speak the truth. I was going to say what I thought. And that was it. But all it takes is one or two people in key positions of seniority that can make your life a living hell. And you can either choose to continue to try to deal with that, or you can just go do something else with your life. Right. And that's what I did. I just chose to go ahead and retire and go move on with my life and go do something else, because if I didn't do that, I was probably going to take their life. Right. And I can't do that. That's bad. And I was thinking about taking my own life, and that's bad. Right. Yeah. But I was struggling because people in positions of, I would say, privilege were really, really, really affecting me and my family. And that was making me be almost frantic, right? Trying to figure out how to manage that. And then, so you have to do what you can do for yourself. And then I'm happy to hear that you recognize that so many other veterans are in that same space, because they are. Right. So many veterans are going through the process of trying to understand their experience, because I don't think very few people separate from the service fully happy with what their experience was. Right. It's hard to just be like, oh my God, everything was great all the time. Right. Unfortunately, that's just not realistic. And then they're trying to process what this new normal is going to be like. I was in the office talking this morning with my lieutenant commander. He's retired as well, and he's getting ready to retire from the teaching job. And he's been doing it for like 22 years, teaching. And he has a little store that he sells like candy bars and sodas or whatnot to the kids. And he's like, I'm busy running the store. And I was like, once upon a time we were war fighters. Now you're busy selling candy bars to kids, and I'm busy teaching kids about whatever, and
teaching them not to eat too much candy.
Right. But it's just one of these things, trying to come to terms with where you're at in this life. Another analogy is, I told my wife one time, it's like knowing you were really good at something and you'll never do it again. Right. Once upon a time, I was really good at, going to sea with sailors, leading people, damage, crisis, fires, whatever, really good in that moment, but I'll never have to use that part of me ever again. So there's almost like it's painful, right? It's painful.
Well, they get you to be Superman and you fly, right? You have all these unlocked superpowers within your own body. And then you're told, no, you're never going to put that on again. You have to be Clark Kent the rest of your life. It's pretty amazing what you find out about yourself when you're in those environments, And
you have to really look for other ways to find validation, find satisfaction. So I could see where you could connect with veterans in particular. And I also appreciate that you recognized that I think how you were able to save so many is probably because you could empathize, you can connect with their experience because of what you went through. Right. Part of what I retired from the service, I was thinking about taking my own life. Right. And I actually talked to one of my peers about that. And he basically just said, well, just please don't do that. But they didn't take me off the job. They didn't get me, they just don't do that. But there was not really any other additional conversation for that. And thank God I went and got help. But when I look back on that conversation, it's because they didn't really take it serious, right? They just, and unfortunately, that happens too many times out there. So, do you continue to operate in that space where you're working with people that are troubled and trying to help them from get back off that cliff? Are you still operating there?
Yeah. So this is what I was taught by veterans who are in extreme states of fatigue, nervous system strung out. You could observe. I could observe myself, and I saw patterns. All right. And the thing that made me super powerful in that space, the thing that helped me, save those 40 lives within 12 months, was understanding how pain worked. And it doesn't matter if you're a veteran or anybody, right? And it doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional. There's a certain universal pattern here. Pain turns into loneliness before it turns dangerous. So when you're on the job connected to your mates, there's not a goddamn thing we can't handle. Bring on the pain, bring on the hard days. It just makes us closer. But pain gets to a certain duration or intensity where it transforms without the person knowing into loneliness. And that is super dangerous for humans who are very social. And when you feel like you're all alone in this, no one understands, no one's got my back, so I have to be hyper vigilant. And if I'm trying to sleep at night, that means I have to tell myself I'm safe, but my hypervigilance says, no, if you drop your guard for a second, something bad's going to happen. So I'm going to give you all these crappy thoughts to think as you're trying to get to sleep. And as you're trying to get out of bed in the morning, it'll ambush you again with all these things in your head. Oh. So this is what the spreadsheet doesn't see, is the first thing that needs to happen is addressing the loneliness that the people feel. And I'm going to ask everybody listening, everybody's up against something right now. Okay. The space I came to this with was the veteran space, but everyone's up against something. It could be a relationship, could be a disease, it could be whatever, could be a work thing. But ask yourself the question, how many other people do you think are in the same situation as you right now on this planet? And give it a real number. Don't just leave it as a lot. So, when I was low, I'm thinking at least a couple of million. All right. So picture this, whatever you're up against, and you've got that number in your head, it could be 10, 20, however many. Put half of them on your left, put half of them on your right. And they're all looking in saying, hey, if you can find a way forward for you, you can find a way forward for us. And in that moment, when you're up against it, it's really hard to make progress, because it's not just loneliness that I discovered was the problem, and you had to break that loneliness. And I'll share how to do that in a second, but the resultant fatigue. So loneliness turns on our fight or flight. I'm the only one who's got my back. And that ambushes you in the 5 minutes trying to go to sleep, and especially in the 5 minutes waking up. And if you can say, look, it might take me a week, a month, a year to make an inch of progress, but that's actually 1,000,000 inches of progress. And if you can have those people willing you on, at some point in the future, you're going to meet those people and they're going to say, you know what, we're so glad you chose what you did before you met me, because, man, one conversation with you've just saved me 10 years. And I'll speak to, because I don't like to speak, theoretically, I'll speak to how exactly it happens. Those people stuck up against whatever you're stuck up against, there's things they want to say, but they can't say them. There's truth they want to speak, but they can't speak it. And those unspoken words become like rocks around your heart. And the world we currently live in loves giving us alcohol to pour over it, loves giving us pills to pour over it, And I'm not, against either, but here's what I know to be true. If you can speak to your experience, all right, and I came to this from the veteran space, when we had a veteran speaking their truth about what they were up against and what they were getting through, in the audience, people's jaw used to pop open like that, right? And they'd say, fuck, I thought I was the only one.
Right.
And that was the watershed moment. And this is the qualification we have with whatever we're up against. Once we get through that, we can break the isolation. I can't break the isolation of someone up against cancer. I've never had cancer, but if you're up against that, that's your qualification. You can do the most powerful thing that no one else can do, that only one human can do for another. And then my specialty these days is to help people get out of that fatigue by targeting those 2 golden 5-minute periods, the 5 minutes going to sleep and 5 minutes waking up. Because I can't do what you do, Gary, or anyone who's listening, but if I can have you access your peace, your power, your connection, your stillness, your safety going to sleep, you're not just going to be sleeping better. You're not just going to be healing better. Okay, you're going to be waking up feeling a bit better. And in that 5-minute period of waking up, I've also got ways to help people start their day with that peace, power, connection. And when their feet swing over the edge, they've won the first 5 minutes of the day. So it was from that really dark place that I learned these tools that give people an easy win. Most everybody can focus on a little bit of breath work going to sleep because we're doing it anyway. And most people can focus on a little bit of breath work waking up. Very easy thing to do. Massive state change. Massive state change. Because here's the thing. When we connect powerfully to ourselves, that increases the likelihood of connecting powerfully outside of ourselves. And we respond so powerfully to connecting to others outside of ourselves. But if we're not sleeping, if we're low on energy, then the world occurs very differently. I'm flat, I'm low, shut up, I need a coffee, shut up, I need an energy drink. Everything's always in my way. And oh, geez, I'm going to try and go to sleep now. And I'm not looking forward to it. You know what? I'll just drink a bunch of alcohol, So, I stand before everybody today wanting them to get their peace, power, connection back within themselves from a natural and organic way inside of themselves. And that's been the winning formula, breaking isolation and getting people out of fatigue.
And so because the app you created or that you work with, it's called Breathworks, right?
Breathwork in Bed.
Breathwork in Bed. And so the idea behind the app is it's going to lead you through those 5-minute periods of time to do certain kind of breathing techniques.
Well, the idea behind it is all you have to do is tell it when you want to sleep and when you want to wake up, and then it falls out of your phone exactly when you need it. Because when people are tired, they just want to go, look, here's what I want, take care of it for me. They don't want to remember 6 things, and they want an easy win. Right. And look, every dollar you invest in breath work will give you 1,000 back. And the whole intention behind me creating the app was permanency. Permanency is very important to me because we can have a great conversation, but if we care about people, we want them to have access to this power, not just when we're here, but tomorrow, the next day, when they're going to sleep, when they're waking up. So I don't like phones and I don't like tech, but I threw myself into that space knowing that everyone's got a phone and everyone's got lungs. And the most powerful part of this equation isn't, my Breathwork in Bed app. It's discovering what your own lungs can do. And once you discover just how powerful your own lungs are, and that before you leave the house, you can give yourself the peace, power, connection. You don't need to chase things outside of your skin for, the car, the relationship, the money. If we can give that to ourselves organically, life becomes more of a victory lap than I've got to claw something that I don't have, if that makes sense.
It does. When I was going through that challenging part of my life, when I was originally coming to terms with the fact that I had mental health challenges, because I didn't want to hear that diagnosis, right? I thought for sure I had a
Yeah.
heart problem. I thought for sure there was some other medical ailment, because why I was trembling all the time, or I was always looking, I was an alcoholic. I was always looking for something to I thought I was hungry all the time. I thought I was becoming diabetic because I was always
Yeah.
shaking, right?
Yeah.
And going finally to get help, and the therapist was just like, no, you just, I think you got some challenges. And I hate being on medications that, unfortunately, I call it my don't have a panic attack medication, right? Because it helps me to hold it off. But I will tell you, breathing, not so much meditation for me, but just deep breathing is a significant thing for me to do. And I do that. And so when I first heard about your program, I thought that just made so much sense, because I do that in bed. I do take deep breaths in bed at night, and I try to calm myself down, because I'm recovering from the day of all the things, and I'm thinking about everything I'm going to need to do tomorrow. And it's not even that it's bad. It's just there's so much going on in my mind all the time.
Yeah.
And it's trying to just regulate it all. And you kind of don't pay attention to it during the day because you're running. But when you get to bed, it kind of, like you said, it just kind of hits you in that 5 minutes before you go to bed.
All our imbalances show up at nighttime. We can say we're killing it, but at nighttime, that's when the imbalances show, and that's where, unfortunately, our nervous system is always listening. We can kid ourselves in our mind living a life out of balance because everyone's doing it. But ultimately, there is a deeper truth that lives in all of us. And the reason why I'm very confident in recommending breath work to people is breath outranks the thinking mind. But people don't experience that until they really need to dial into it. So if you think of us as humans evolving, before we were sentient and putting paintings on rock walls, before we were speaking, we were breathing. And that deep ancient wiring lives inside of us. And it's actually much more powerful than our thoughts. If you've ever been sort of punched in the stomach, everything just goes quiet up here, and it's just, I don't have the air, right? And when I was a martial artist, I used to exploit that. I was sort of the guy that was known to beat black belts, guys more skillful, more experienced than me, because I didn't try and punch them in the head. I tried to take out their lungs, because I noticed there'd be a time in the fight, once their lungs were gone, they went from black belt to white belt. And I was still at my skill level, not classically higher than them, but they didn't have the breath. And I noticed if you could take the breath away, the brain goes to mush, and you can do what you want to do. But then when it comes to down regulating the nervous system, I'd love to show you something that's super simple. You can show your students, but it's my kind of party trick that within 3 breaths, you can completely relax your body.
Okay, let's do it.
Can we, now we're just on the hour. Is it possible to hit pause? I just got to go to the bathroom myself.
Yep. Hold on 1 second. All right, Tim. What you going to show me here? What we're going to do? Just breathing?
So this is my favorite party trick, how to completely relax your body, sometimes your mind as well. And everything's an invitation. And breathing is easy, but because we've been breathing our whole life, I always ask for permission. So, Gary and anyone listening that wants to do this and have a enjoyable experience with your very own breath, do you give permission to your very own breath to make every single cell in your body feel really, really good?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. That was easy. 2 more questions. Do you give permission to your very own breath to make your conscious thinking mind feel really, really good?
Yes.
Great. Last question. Do you give permission to your very own breath to make your unconscious mind feel really, really good?
Yes.
Awesome. Now, Gary, are you standing right now?
I am.
Okay, no worries. This is ideally done seated, but as long as you've got, do you have a desk in front of you that you can hold on to if needed?
Yep,
Great.
I got it.
All right. So, Gary, all we're going to do right now is breathe in, then breathe in more. Just give that a try. Breathe in more. And once you're in more, bit more, and then just wriggle your shoulders, wriggle your spine, wriggle it around the place like you're wriggling in bed. Wriggle your shoulders, wriggle your spine, feel that chest opening up. And I want you to let out a really nice, big, loud sigh. And just let that energy go through your system. That's your energy. You did that for you. I did not do that. Okay, that's you.
Okay.
Pretty
good.
Oh yeah, and we're just dipping our toe into the shallow end of this. All right, we're going to go comfortably a little deeper. Now, you might have noticed when you breathed in more, your top third filled up a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in their 2 fingers and thumbs, they have a power button that if they pinch, they will inflate 2 fingers and thumbs. That's so 2 fingers and thumbs. That's right. Okay. And when we pinch them together, we help inflate this top third. So we're going to do exactly the same thing, but halfway through our inhale, I want you to pinch those things and notice how they help inflate your top third.
Okay.
All right. So we're just going to blow it out.
Are you breathing in through your nose only, or are you breathing in through your mouth?
Ideally through your nose. Yes. There's a reason for that. We'll talk about it later. But I invite you to have these little power buttons ready and just blow it out. Out. And then when you're all the way out, breathe in, and then halfway through, hit those power buttons. In. Now hold it and wriggle. Wriggle it, wriggle your spine. Feel that movement up and down your spine. Wriggle and shake. Feel that chest opening. Feel the chest opening like a flower. Feel that chest opening like a flower, and the warm sun's coming into it. And I want you to let out the loudest sigh ever.
It definitely makes you lightheaded. Definitely makes you lightheaded. At least I'm getting lightheaded. That's why I'm holding on to the table.
Yeah. So yeah, you ideally want to be seated, not operating heavy machinery or driving, and not cutting up carrots.
Not cutting up carrots. Very good. It reminds. What's the third one? That was 2, right? Is there one more, or is that what we're doing? Those 2 breaths.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is this exactly what we did, but we're going to breathe in through our nose as fast as we can. Okay. So
now, is it better to be seated doing this, or can you do this laying down as well?
Well, you can do this laying down. Seated is fine.
Okay.
But like I said, the first few times you do this, you want to be supported in an area where you're not going to fall over or impact anybody. But what I'm going to show you now is everyone's got a nose, and behind the nose, we have sinuses. And when we breathe through our nose, we produce a particular gas. Okay. And that gas isn't produced when we breathe through our mouth. This particular gas has a lot of medicinal qualities to our bodies. It improves your immune response. It improves your performance, improves recovery, improves mood, mental clarity, and the list goes on. And if you went to a chemist and said, hey, I want pills that do all these things for me, you'd be paying hundreds of dollars every week. But the gas our nose produces is called nitric oxide. It's a vasodilator. They gave it to athletes to help increase their performance. It's also a key indicator for sexual health as well. All right. And us men, we need to keep that in check as much as we don't talk about it, because our longevity is relative to our sexual health. Okay. Nitric oxide is the key ingredient in Viagra. All right. Because they gave that to athletes, and then the athletes reported all these other benefits. Right.
Right.
So I'm going to invite you to breathe through your nose on this one, but I want you to breathe through as quickly as possible, like you're really trying to snort air over your sinuses straight into your brain. Okay. According to my coach, when I was fighting, he said, Tim, before you do a combination, do a big snort through your nose, because that will oxygenate your brain and you'll have that mental clarity. Okay. So as we do this one, same as we did before, but we're going to really try and suck that air over our nose into our brain, if that makes sense.
Okay. So not doing one long deliberate pull, but just rapid
inhale. And my recommendation for you is, with your power buttons, have them on the bench that you're hanging on to, right?
I got them right here.
Right here, but just have them near the bench so you can grab onto something if needed. In fact, if I was you, I'd be actually like grabbing onto the bench like that, and pinching, those ones. And you did well too with before you naturally looked up to open up that top third. All right. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to do this time. All right. So blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, out. When you're all the way out, mouth closed, rapid inhale and look up. Okay, again, wriggle your spine, feel your chest opening, feel like the warm sun is opening your chest. And I want you to cover your mouth and let out a really big yawn. Cover your mouth and Good.
Wow. How did you get into breathing, brother? Like, how did you get into all of this? Did you learn this in the service, or is this just your journey after the service?
I'm happy to get into that, but I do want to stay with people so they can have this as something that they can use. So if our goal here is permanency, if people can have this, and if they walk away from this with this little push your fingers together and snort your nose, to bring yourself back to center. So this is a little centering breath that we're doing.
Yeah.
So when I'm in public, and I'm human, things annoy me. So if something's bothering me, I will discreetly breathe it in, shake it, come back to my center, come back to the version of me that is centered, mature, powerful, peaceful, confident. Because there is a version of me that's off-centered, immature, doesn't have power, very reactive. And I can tolerate things during the daytime, but at nighttime, I never knew why I had to drink so much, because that was me trying to create balance. So if I can go through the day, and if I can bring myself back to who I know I'm supposed to be, and makes me happy, then and people can access that, because if you don't access it underneath your own skin, you could end up like me, and that's trying to self-regulate with more pharmaceuticals than I needed. So I didn't just have pills in my medicine cabinet. I had them by my bed, in my car, in the fruit bowl, in my wallet, in most of my jacket pockets, because when something bothered me, I didn't know that breathing could help. I just thought a pill would help. And nothing wrong with pills, but no one tells you that they're kind of like short-term energy loans, and you've got to pay back that money with a whole lot of interest. So happy to share about how I got to this, but let's just stay here for a minute because you're discovering something. So I noticed when you yawned and you opened your jaw, there was a lot of tension coming out of that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the vagus nerve, the nerve in our body that holds our stress, has two big attachment joints behind the jaw. And a lot of stressed people suffer what's called bruxism, where they're grinding their teeth at nighttime and they've got to wear mouth guards because your nervous system is backed up, right? So opening that jaw, is like I call it a psychic spew. All right. So when you and push that jaw further open manually, it kind of feels like a bunch of stuff is purging out. As much as that looks ridiculous, it to me, it's not as ridiculous looking as having pills in your jacket pocket and in the fruit bowl.
Right.
So what we're going to do now is exactly what we did, but this time when we wriggle, I want you to wriggle up a yawn. Feel like I call it yawn juice coming up your neck. And when you can't stop that yawn, I want you to cover your mouth and resist it as much as possible, as in push the hand against your mouth. Okay, so let's practice this now. I want you to blow into your hand, and I want your hand to stop most of the air. So take a deep breath in and go. And really stop the air coming out with your hand. You feel that?
Now, are you also, where does that sound come from for you? Does it come from your throat or come from your lungs?
Well, the yawn comes from probably your throat, but if you do it right, you kind of go into the same position almost like you're throwing up, because we're literally purging, we're throwing up stuck energy. So what I'm showing you right now is, when there's something stuck in your stomach, you tickle the back of your throat and you throw it up, right?
Right.
When there's something stuck in your vagus nerve, I'm showing you how to essentially throw that up. Okay. And to get a little bit of clearance. All right. So just practice that. And notice how much you can resist the air coming out by pushing that hand on your face. All right. You got that?
I got it.
So we're going to do that after we did the deep breath in, wriggle, wriggle, wriggle. We're going to wriggle up a yawn. And when that yawn cannot be stopped, we're just going to let out the loudest, biggest jaw opening for as long as possible. Cool?
I'm going to try my best. There we go.
All right. I'll be with you the whole time and I'll talk you through it. So with your power buttons ready, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, 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 out. And when you're all the way out, rapid inhale through your nose, pinch your fingers, open, 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 in, look up, look up, look up. Now wriggle up that yawn, wriggle up that yawn, wriggle up that yawn. Feel that yawn juice going up the side of your neck. Feel that yawn juice coming up. It's coming up. You can't stop it. You can't stop it. And when you can't stop it, loudest yawn ever, big mud mouth. Loud, loud, loud. You can do more. You can do more. Out, 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 out. You can do more. Out, 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 out. Woo.
I like it. It reminds me of I did some breathing exercises one time, and they would talk about having to breathe it out and going, oh, and like really exhaling, getting that air out. But what is it about having the hand over the mouth to help suppress or stifle, or just it's because it's different. It feels different than just breathing in and blowing out, right?
Oh yeah,
interesting. And so I'm feeling like it's like it's hard to even explain the feeling. I just feel warm and just like a warm liquid's running over me. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of power that you've just tapped into then, right? So essentially, definitely. we are powerful people, but we connect naturally. But what we also seem to do naturally is hold on to blockages. So what we did right then was remove blockages so we could naturally return back to who we are. Okay, which is powerful, connected people, connecting inside of yourself. So what we did right then, so think of electricity. It has a a frequency, right?
Right.
Sound has a frequency. Your vagus nerve, our connective system, certain blockages get released when we create a frequency. So when we're making that noise, we're extending the amount of time we create that sound. There's a reason we create a sound when we go, okay. And when I'm working with high school students, I'll get them to make it really low and then medium, and then their yawns at a really high pitch. Okay, because those different frequencies access different blockages in the vagus nerve. All right. So, these things aren't thought through, they're embodied. The body keeps the score, as they say. And what we're doing right now is using our breath to unlock those blockages so we can just have that little bit of distance, little bit of peace, little bit of standoff, chance to go from your fight or flight into your executive function, where you can see it all, be with it all, and I know I'm good. So the reason why I get people to put their hand over their mouth, it's threefold. Firstly, you can extend the sound. If I just go, that's pretty quick, right? But if I stifle it and go, I can quadruple the amount of time I can stay in that frequency. But also my hand is pushing on my jaw, so I can open my mouth more. Okay, the more I open my mouth, there's a reason why lions yawn. There's a reason why animals, after they've been chased, they shake. Okay. And so simply massaging that jaw, and you can't stop it. Once you've sort of taken the skin off the milk, so to speak, it just breaks the ice. It just keeps coming through. So I invite you right now, just with your fingers, just rub and tap your jaw. Okay. As comfortable as you feel like it. And then grab your jaw and just pull it down and let it open a little bit more. And just hold that position and allow that stuff to fall out. It's like stuff starts falling out. Obviously, keep breathing. And when you sort of let it go, just note this, you kind of feel a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I had this thing where my ears never unclog. And I'm always trying to unclog my ears, and I think it's attached to my jaw, and the fact that I have that bruxism and I have that jaw clenching and I have teeth cracking because I carry so much stress in my jaw,
Okay, I wasn't going to do this, but I want to show you something. All right. So, you know what humming is, right? You just go, right?
Yeah.
What I want you to do is take a deep breath in like you did, but then with your right thumb, close your right nostril and then gently pinch your left nostril so you can still hum, but the air's resisting. And I want you to hum with that. It's a bit like, when you're in your hand, when you're slowing down the air, I want you to do the same thing with your finger, stopping the slowing down the hum. Okay. So
let's give it a shot.
Let's just give this a try. Just, blow it out, breathe in, and then notice how you can feel that vibration. Feel that vibration. Feel the vibration. Feel the vibration. Okay. Now, just so you know, humming increases nitric oxide uptake by like 2,000%. So sitting there humming through your nose, it's a big uptake in nitric oxide. Now what I'm going to get you to do is, as you're humming and resisting the air, and I need you to keep it consistent, not like pop, 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 but consistent where you're sort of blowing against it. And now I want you to push your jaw forward. Okay. Feel like your ears are popping. And then when you do that, you'll notice the sound will go through your eustachian tubes, I think they're called.
Okay.
And you'll feel it going into your ears. So pushing your jaw forward and then humming, and see if you can sort of position your jaw so you actually can feel it going almost inside your head through your ear canals.
Okay. Okay.
All
Here we
right.
go.
So blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out, blow it out, shake it out. And when you're ready, breathe in. Thumb, start humming, find that space. Now push your jaw forward. Push your jaw forward and notice it going into your head. Feel that vibration going into your brain. Doing really well.
Wow.
Did
That's very cool.
Did you actually feel it going through into your brain? Like it goes inside of you?
Well, I felt it coming across the top of my cheeks, right? Yes, the brain, I guess, as well. I guess you could say, I can feel it coming through, like you said, those eustachian tubes. Wow.
Yeah. So if you can hum and put nitric oxide through those tubes, and there's going to be a whole lot more access to an unblocked system doing things like that, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. It feels great. I feel very, I would say, clear-headed right now. Like, I mean, look, it's the end of my day, right? I had a long day of teaching. I was surrounded by kids all day. And so they were doing this in the evening. I feel very alert right now, though. Very good. Very good stuff, bro. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Wow. And like, how many breaths did we actually take? Less than 10, right?
Yeah.
And the state you have right now, let's not step over this. You know how many pills are out there that do what we just did naturally? You know how many products are out there that do what you just did naturally? And this is the thing. You don't discover this stuff until you have authentic conversation with people with usually skin in the game.
Yeah. Very cool. No, it's very enlightening. Very enlightening.
Well, I'm happy now because, Gary, you've got that for life. Okay, that is you being able to self-medicate now, because people discover it's not a set of lungs we were given. It's a medicine cabinet with a lot of different shelves. And you breathe a certain way, you can elicit a certain response. So guess what? We're in charge of our state now. And there is a whole range of breathwork techniques that elicit a certain response. The ones I've shown you now give you quick access to blockage removal. The ones that can help you drop into a really deep state going to sleep. Obviously, I've got them. You can look for them on Spotify, or, I mean, I've got my app, which is specifically there to fall out of your phone when you need it, as well as getting out of bed. That can be quite a game changer for people, because a lot of people wake up and they're like, what the hell is going on? Why am I here on this planet again? So if you can have, if you can have access to that breath work in the first 5 minutes,
right.
Massive game change.
Very impressive. Very cool. No, I'm into it. I'm definitely.
You look different, actually. You look kind of relaxed and more confident now. Before, I could see you were really you're wanting it to work, and you were in kind of work mode. You look a lot softer now, and I'm not just saying
that second phase. So the first 2 or 3, I was kind of struggling with it, but I'll tell you, the one with the nostrils, that one really did something for me. That one really, I think the first 3 loosened it all up, right? And then, of course, learning, I'm into the vibration thing, right? Just so you know, part of my own personal life philosophy is I believe in that. I believe in vibration. I believe in resonance. I believe in the universe and that space, right? And so I believe in those things. And so a lot of the things you're saying, I'm super interested in that. And I'm interested in how to best leverage natural healing instead of having to take all these damn pills every day, or how to use my I was going to ask you how do the lungs help somebody, but then I think this kind of helped me understand that, right? So no, I'm interested in I think this is just the beginning of me looking into this kind of stuff. But very cool. I have done deep breathing exercises. I have done, of course, people trying to teach me how to meditate or whatever it is. I'm praying and all these other things. But I will say those breathing techniques, in particular, the nostril one, for whatever the reason, that really loosened up something in my head. So very cool. Very cool, Tim. Thank you.
Well, Gary, I'd love to, offer you the Breathwork in Bed 28-day challenge.
Okay.
So my app has a 28-day free period that once you tell it when you want to sleep, when you want to wake up, it'll just fall out exactly when you need it. And you can actually have access to those spaces. And it's not just the sort of the once or twice thing. When you have those little reminders that make it easy and effortless, you notice it compounding over time. So if you're up for it, I'd love to offer you the challenge.
Yeah, I'm into it. So do I just download the app on my cell phone and then it just kicks off?
Yeah, download the app, choose the 28-day free option. I mean, like all apps on the App Store, you do have to go through a pay wall, as they say. They do need your details, etc. But if it's not working for you within those 28 days, just cancel it. But I know, like, it costs like maybe less than a cup of coffee a month for this thing. And I know it saved me on so many occasions. I would have certainly paid a lot more than a cup of coffee for a good night's sleep.
No, I'm going to give it a shot tonight. I'm going to give it a try. And because I will tell you, I got sleep apnea. I wear a CPAP machine at night while I'm sleeping. And I have since 2000 and I think 10, right? So it's just, sleep is a challenge for me. And then add into all of that, all the other challenges, right? And then the gritting my teeth, and there's just sleep is, and I know how important sleep is. So I'm definitely going to look into it. And I really appreciate your time and you sharing all of this with the listeners, with me. And I appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you very much for it. Is there anywhere else you would like people that are listening to the sound of your voice, to my voice, to this conversation? Is there anywhere else you would like them to go, either to look you up or look up any more information you would point them to, or me to, when it comes to like learning how to work your breath?
Sure. If you want one-on-one with me, look me up through LinkedIn. Tim Thomas, Breathwork in Bed. Corporates kind of love what I do because once sleep improves, sick days get cut in half. Sleep poor people take twice as many sick days, and the data represents that. For people who would just want a good night's sleep tonight, literally tonight, it's natural and immediate. Download the Breathwork in Bed app. Feel free to choose a 28-day option and see what your world is like when you're in charge of the 5 minutes going to sleep and the 5 minutes waking up. Of course, Breathwork in Bed is across all socials, but the whole reason I'm here is I can't do what you do, Gary. I can't do what your listeners do. But if I can ensure that every night you're getting an amazing night's sleep, then you're going to be bringing your gifts into the world so much better. That's what gets me super excited. Seeing what happens to people when their sleep is improved. All these incredible things start flourishing. It's a bit like sleep is the soil from which everything grows. And people have these dormant seeds of greatness, seeds of uniqueness, just waiting for that soil quality to improve. And once the sleep improves, all these things that are inside of a person start coming out, and it's genuinely amazing. So yes, we're talking about sleep right now and practical ways to go about it. Okay, I've created a practical way for people to give it a go, right? But It's really about you flourishing, you being able to rest, restore, heal, so you can bring your gifts into the world generously.
I like it. I'm into it, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to trying out the app. I'm gonna give it a shot tonight, to be honest. It's gonna happen. Well, hey, Tim, I appreciate you. Everybody listening to the sounds of our voice. Hopefully, I'll make sure I put all of your information on the video when I post this, and of course, on all the podcast description and episodes. And I think we're connected on LinkedIn already, so I look forward to letting you know how it goes. All right, everybody. Well, Tim, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you, brother. You have a good day out there. Okay.
You too, Gary.
I will. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. Y'all get some good breath out there. That's a big deal. Bye.
And I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics. My words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it. I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know